One of the arguments that we've heard from a number of people, particularly in the center and towards the right, is that we should not focus just on weapons. That there are some people who say, well, we should focus, say, on Hollywood and the glorification of violence, whether it's videos or whether it's films. That we should focus on mental health and counselors in schools. And thankfully, I think the president's proposal for gun control, it provides more resources for schools to have more counselors and keep a better close watch on troubled students and to provide more resources there. But there was an interesting moment in London in which when we talk about keeping track of Hollywood and trying to get Hollywood to cut down on violence, there was Arnold Schwarzenegger premiering his newest film, the first film that he has starred in, where he's been the main star since he left the governor's mansion in California. And he was asked about Hollywood's role in promoting violence. And here was Arnold Schwarzenegger's response.
One should not confuse what is entertainment and what is real life. You know, the real life, what has happened in America and what has happened all over the world when people get killed with guns is a tragedy. And we always have to try to do everything we can to figure out ways of how to reduce this kind of a violence. And we all have to participate in that dialogue.
You know, Daniel, as far as Schwarzenegger's claim that, there's a difference, obviously, between Hollywood and between real life, I get his point, and that we can't just like we can't just focus on assault weapons, we can't just blame Hollywood or the video game makers or schools that don't have enough resources or police, that it's got to be sort of a collaborative effort. But I sort of wonder if there is a little bit more of responsibility that Hollywood has than perhaps Arnold Schwarzenegger is letting on, and that when you create the sort of celebrity culture where we do glorify violence in our pop culture, that in and of itself, that does have an impact on people, particularly youngsters who are going to the movies, who are watching hours and hours of television, that to the extent our society is allowing us to glorify violence, to glorify gun violence in particular, I don't see how that's helpful to our society in this effort.
I'm going to give you the one-word signature Matt Stoller response. No. That's, David, that's just, look, you want us to if we want to make ourselves get all high and mighty and feel good and pat ourselves on the back and be self-righteous about it, then okay, let's say that violence in video games and movies needs to be part of the conversation. But guess what? There is no proof in any study, and I challenge any of our listeners, any of our viewers, I challenge you to show me some study of violence in video games and movies showing that it actually leads to greater violence. Even a correlation. David, keep in mind, okay, all of Schwarzenegger's movies, they're popular all over Europe and Asia where there aren't incidences of gun violence like this. And in fact, when you think of the video game capital of the world, what country do you think of? You think of Japan, where strict restrictions on firearms mean that they practically have gun deaths in the single digits every year. No. The fact of the matter is, there's no proof that people have difficulty distinguishing between video games and movies and reality. And if they do, they're probably psychotic and have issues anyway. You want to talk about building up our mental health system and making our mental health system more robust? Fine. That's a broader issue. I mean, how about just we're still working on giving people universal health care. The cutbacks at the state and local level are meaning that we're now having nurses that are catering to multiple schools and children with asthma attacks. I mean, I just read about this in the city of Chicago. That there are emergencies in terms of underfunding there at a very, very basic level that Republicans and even many centrist Democrats don't want to touch because they're obsessed with our out of control spending. So in order to kick the mental health habit, we're going to have to kick the austerity habit first. This is just a classic example of Americans fixating on something that makes us all feel good and yet it doesn't actually make us do any of the hard choices.
Daniel Marin's coming out in support of Arnold Schwarzenegger when it comes to defending Hollywood. I'm not surprised, but I will say that I think for all sorts of reasons, though, there is a certain responsibility, there's a certain burden on Hollywood, and maybe not for reasons related to gun violence, but just in terms of the our society and our culture and what sort of impact we have on our kids, that I do wish that people who are the promoters and the producers of these films and these videos would keep in mind whether it's the sort of thing they would want their own kids or their own grandkids to be watching or playing with, and what sort of impact that has, even if it's just in terms of their social skills or their interests. That's all I'll say about that. We're going to take a break, and we're going to talk with Brian Fisher, who is with the American Family Association. He is one of the more controversial figures on the conservative right. He has a radio show. He has said some pretty I would say, controversial things about all sorts of issues, particularly the issue of homosexuality and LGBT rights. We're going to challenge him next when Take Action News continues.